Hey guys, Mike Turner here for Kickstartpoker.com, and in today's video we're going to talk about value betting on dangerous boards. In this hand I pick up Ace-8 offsuit on the button on the 10-20 level, and it gets folded around to me, and looking at my opponents in the blinds, they seem reasonably tight against steals. They fold their big blinds to steal raises 93% of the time and 61% of the time. I only have a small sample of hands, but we have to go with what we have here. And I think it's important to note that you don't have to raise a hand like Ace-8 offsuit from the button during the first blind level, but it's generally going to be profitable against most opponents if you're comfortable playing post-flop. The only reason why you would not want to raise here perhaps is the fact that the big blind has a pretty big stack here and is likely to play a pot against us, which could sometimes get you in tricky situations because the big stack can put a lot of pressure on you post-flop. But this particular opponent is not super loose aggressive, so that won't be much of an issue, I think. So we're just going to raise our Ace-8 off here on the button to a standard 3x raise, and we get called by the big blind. We see a flop of Queen Ace-10 with 2 clubs, and we flop top pair, but it's a very dangerous board with flush and straight possibilities. Villain actually checks to us, and we definitely need to bet for value here, I think. We also need to bet a decent amount here because we want to protect our hand from straights and flushes. A flop like this in a way is pretty good because the chance of our opponent actually paying us off on a drawy board are higher than on a dry board. So for example, suppose the flop was Ace-7 deuce rainbow, my opponent would usually fold if I make a continuation bet here if he doesn't have an ace, so I wouldn't get any value for my pair of aces. But on a drawy board like this, there's a higher chance that my opponent actually has something that he can pay us off with. So I think we need to bet a decent amount, and in this case we bet 2/3 of the pot, and our opponent calls. We go to the turn, which is the King of Hearts. This really looks like a scare card. All the Jack X hands just made a straight, and if he called the flop with hands like King Queen or King 10, he just made 2 pair. On the other hand, I can still get value from worse aces and flush draws. There's now also a hard draw on board, so that increases the odds a little that my opponent could be drawing to a flush. All things considered, I think there's still room for value betting against his drawing range and his weaker value range. We don't need to bet really large here though, because we don't want to commit ourselves to the pot. So we don't really want to bet like 250, 300 or even more, because that would, cost us quite a bit of chips, and it would really create a big pot, and we're almost committing ourselves to the pot. So we don't really want to do that. So we're just going to bet 160, a little over half the pot, and our opponent calls. And then the river card, it makes things even worse because all of his Queen X hands just made trips, so they beat us now too. And there are 3 hearts on board, so there's a little bit of a chance that he could have a flush here. And when he checks to us again, I think it's very hard to see which hands in his range that we actually beat are going to call here. So value betting doesn't make much sense in my opinion. Betting as a bluff is an option to get him off like 2 pair or trips. But I don't think that's a very good play either because there aren't too many of those hands in his range, and we'd probably have to bet really big to make him fold those types of hands. So that's a little bit of a risky bluff that we would have to make here. So here I definitely think that the best play is to just check behind and use our pair of aces for showdown value, because there's simply not enough room for either a value bet or a bluff bet. So we're just going to check behind, and our opponent shows 9-8 for a flush draw, which he was chasing on 2 streets. From his perspective, I don't think it was going to be very profitable, especially if you play it in a passive way like this. If you're calling bets with your flush draw out of position. In his situation, it would have been much better if he would just check raise the flop or the turn as a semi-bluff, or just give up on the turn once he misses. Even the flop call is kind of debatable. on a board like that, because a 9-9 flush draw might not even be good, even if you hit your club on a turn or river. So we still win a decent pot here, which is nice, and it's important that with a hand like Ace-8, even though it is a very dangerous board here, it also offers opportunities to get value from drawing hands like we do here. Whereas on dry boards, you usually don't get value with a pair of aces. The only thing that you need to watch out for in hands like this, situations like this, is against opponents who are capable of semi-bluffing. I'm up against a big stack here, and he could very well check raise the turn or the flop as a semi-bluff, and this would put me in a very dicey situation. But in this case, villain is not super aggressive, so in this hand, I don't think that was really a concern. But against a very aggressive opponent, sometimes it makes sense to check back the turn for some pot control and prevent him from check raising, and also to possibly induce a river bluff. So that's something to keep in mind, that you generally maybe want to play it a little bit differently against opponents who are capable of semi-bluffing, especially opponents with a big stack who have the room to do so. But here, I think in this situation, it was best to just value bet both the flop and a turn, and then just check back the river. Okay, that's it. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.